So now that we learned about youth makeup on this side, we're going to talk about how to do a middle-aged makeup. And then for this one, I'm going to use just powders, aside from like a lip pencil and maybe something on my eyes. But I'm going to show you how to do all of your like wrinkles and shading just using powders. I think using powders is a really great way to kind of like step into age makeup and to learn how to do it. I think that powders are a lot more forgiving. They blend away a lot more easily than if I were to use creams, and I think a lot of times people think that you can only use powders if you're trying to do something that's really subtle, but I actually think that you can really make them intense for stage as well, and so you could do an extreme old age makeup and just use powders. I think it just kind of depends on the amount that you're putting on and just how you blend it. So since we did my original age video that was strictly just old age, I did that with creams. I wanted to show you how you could age with just powders. So I'm going to be using eyeshadows and highlighting and contour and blush powders to just show you how to do a quick old age makeup. So I have my foundation on and I have it powdered down because I'm not going to put any more creams on my face. I didn't color correct. One thing that I feel with age makeup, so if I'm doing a youth makeup, that's when I color corrected because I want my face to be as bright and awake as possible. But for my middle-aged side, and anything that's like, yeah, like middle-age, old age, I don't waste my time doing corrective makeup because if I'm just gonna put it under eye bag back in, I don't see the point of me color correcting it. So obviously if you have like a face tattoo you have to cover, you're gonna need to do that, I'm sure, unless it's part of your character, but otherwise I don't really worry about like covering my acne or my under eye circles or any other kind of imperfection, just because usually even like my acne, that texture is probably just gonna help with the age makeup. So now that I'm powdered, I'm gonna start my contouring. So I'm gonna use a couple different colors to contour. I really like to layer colors when I'm doing any kind of shading, just because I feel like it helps give a little bit more depth when you have that gradient, so it's not just all hard and soft edges, there's just like a nice kind of flow, and I think that that really helps to like sculpt the face or sculpt the wrinkles or whatever it is that you're doing. So first I'm just going to come in and kind of do my typical contouring that I do. So this is a foundation powder, and I usually will layer like a darker powder and a lighter powder, especially for stage. You really want to make sure that you can see it, and if you're going to do anything where you're going to be photographed, and so don't forget, you don't want to be a floating head, as I always say in all of my classes. So when I'm blending it, I blend it along my jaw, but then I also will pull this down the neck and kind of like the side of the neck as well. So I'm not really going to do any like heavy aging on my neck or anything, but I do want to make sure that I have some sort of color here, so it's not just like all of my stage makeup and then my normal neck, if it is going to be showing. And so we're just going to keep kind of building this up, and you can kind of like brush it on, and then to blend it I just do tiny circles, like I always talk about with blending. And so this shade is like a few shades darker obviously than what I am, but it's still like a little bit cooler, which is going to be better for me, because if I use things that are too warm because I'm so pale, it can get really like muddy and orange, so make sure that you're always picking colors that are more appropriate for your skin tone when you're doing this. I think a lot of times with age makeup people end up using things that are way too warm when they might need something cooler, so if you have really warm skin, then you're probably going to need something warm, but having a little bit of coolness to your makeup really helps to kind of like make shadows sometimes, which are important for age makeup. So we don't really want to turn ourselves like too orange or too red, but you also don't want anything to be so cool that it kind of grays you out, so just kind of always be careful. So that's why, again, I might be doing age makeup, but I'm starting with the same colors that I would use for my corrective makeup, and then I'll just intensify it from there if I need it. So this is just my second contour color that I would use on a regular day, and I'm just layering this over. And so again, you can already see the contrast from this side. We're definitely starting to get a little bit more sculpted. My cheeks don't necessarily look quite as full. And so for my middle-aged makeup, we're just going to focus on doing a little bit of aging around the eyes. We're going to sink this in a little bit, lightly age right here, and then do a couple forehead wrinkles. So to kind of help this get even more intense, I'm going to pull in another shading color, which is not necessarily one I would probably always use, but it's like a little bit grayer. It's like a warmer gray. So I'm going to take that and just kind of like pull that into this. And so you have to remember, we are doing makeup for stage, so though I may not want to wear this in my everyday life and it might seem a a little bit too dark right here, it's just gonna help to kind of like cave my cheeks in a little bit more. And same with right on this side, that's really gonna help. Okay, great. And then again, we just want to make sure we're kind of keeping everything equal. And then you don't want to forget about your jaw. So right now, this probably looks a little bit too intense. My skin probably looks a little bit like almost as dirty, I feel like, on this part. So you can go back in. I'm going to go in with my powder foundation just so it doesn't get too glowy yet. But you can kind of just come in and just smooth everything back out. So in my regular makeup, I do this with highlighter, but I'm going to use my powder foundation. You could do this with like a translucent powder, and that's just going to help to kind of like blend and blur everything kind of back together. So that kind of helps calm that down a little bit, because we want to have that depth and that shadow, but we don't want it to be super fake looking or anything like that. So the next thing that we're going to do is start adding in some of these wrinkles that are necessary. So again, I'm going to start with my same kind of colors that I would use for my regular contouring. And first we're going to hit right here. So anything that I want to kind of sink in, I'm going to put a shadow in. So a lot of times the older we get, this part of our face kind of starts to droop a little bit, and mine are already pretty prominent in my everyday life. So I'm sure that this is something that is certainly going to go once I start aging. And so with these shadows, we're going to blend. This one is going to blend kind of up. So we're going to apply it right in that fold. And if you need to, you can smile to kind of see more of where it would hit. But you have to be careful because sometimes when you follow those lines exactly, they look a little bit odd at rest. And then we can blend it back up. And if I'm like, oh, that's great, but I kind of want it to be more intense, I can pull in a slightly more intense shading color, just like I did on my cheeks. And then you might look at that and be like, what have I done? That's way too dark. But we can always come back in and kind of blend everything out. So I'm really all about kind of like applying things as I drop everything, applying it and then kind of going back and worrying about blending. And what's nice with powders is that they're totally like moldable. We can always go back in and alter them if we have to, just because they're powders. They're just kind of sitting on top of all your makeup. But you can see, especially when I turn to the side, that's a really good shadow that I've made. It's going to need a little bit of work, but we still have to go in and put in highlights. So we're still in an okay place with that. And then I want to do the same thing in my under eyes. And so the smaller the brush that you use, the more kind of like defined you can make that area. With middle-aged makeup, I like to think of just kind of like emphasizing any shadows I might already have on my face. So just kind of like making yourself look a little bit more tired. You know, I'm not going to use like as bright of a blush and things like that, as instead of drawing like hardcore wrinkles or something in. So you can see I'm just going to kind of like get in there and really shade my under eye circles. I'm going to follow what I naturally have. And I think that's a really important part of age makeup, is that you want to go with what's already kind of happening on your face, just so that it looks as natural as possible. And so one spot where we definitely seem to get a lot of darkness, and you can see I made it really, really bright over here at the end of the eye. I think a lot of people forget about that. So I always like to go in and just kind of add like a general shadow in here. And then we probably can come in with like an eyeliner and draw in some actual crow's feet as well. But again, this is just my first contour color. And then this is with no highlighting, so once we highlight, that's always going to help everything pop. So we can kind of come in here. So basically, it's just everywhere that we like highlighted, so that's why it's kind of nice like to do this and watch this first. Everywhere that we really highlighted and wanted to make bright, we're going to come in and kind of like recede on this side. And so I have dimples, so I can add in a couple extra lines if I really want to. Not anything too intense, because again, this is just sort of like a middle age, but we can help kind of emphasize and show that a little bit of aging is happening. And so we don't want your nose to just be like this like makeup free area on your face. So even if you're not going to like change the shape of it or really like define it at all, I like to pull a little bit of shadow down the side of it, just to help it kind of like make sense with the rest of your makeup. So if you want to contour it like you normally would, that's totally fine. But at this point, we're just going to try to make it like match with everything else. And then to get your forehead wrinkles, you can like make different face shapes. Like I can do this, and I'm like, you know, this brush, this might be too large, so this is more of a rounded brush, which is good for bigger areas like this. But if I'm really trying to make something specific, then I'm gonna switch to one that's a little bit smaller. So I use a lot of these like $1, $2, $3 e.l.f. brushes. So this one is just kind of like a flat little brush, and that's going to help me kind of go in there and make all these wrinkles. So again, you can make all different kinds of face shapes. I never really know how to describe them well, so hopefully just making them will help it make a little bit of sense. And again, you're only trying to make yourself middle-aged. So I'm 28, so we'll say we're trying to make me like, I don't know, 48, 58, something like that. Obviously not everyone is going to age this intensely in just like 20 years, but you have to think everything that we're doing for stage. Like I've done age makeup on a character that was supposed to be 30 and who was actually just, he was in his 20s, but we had to put like age makeup on him to play a 30-year-old because everyone else in the cast was supposed to be so young. He just needed to look a little bit older. So what might seem ridiculous in real life will make a lot more sense when you're on like a big grand stage. So this might seem a little bit too intense for just being slightly older. Once, like, if you imagine you're like in a costume, and if I was like next to somebody in makeup like this, it's going to be very obvious that this person is supposed to be very young and this person is supposed to be older. So that's really the most important thing, is you're just trying to like sell a character and sell like a story. So again, so for our forehead, it's a good idea to kind of follow what you naturally have if you have it. If you don't, that's why having research is really important, because you may not always have like the wrinkles in the places that you need to have them. But if you have photos of other people's wrinkles, you can kind of see what like a natural wrinkle pattern looks like. I can't stand, like, so even though when I do this, I have a wrinkle that goes all the way across my forehead, to me, I feel like at rest, it looks a little bit odd. So I'll usually break them up slightly. So it's going to be a little odd in general, because I only have half of my face wrinkly. But hopefully this kind of helps. And so we can even come in and do a little bit of a shadow here to make it more of like a crow's feet situation. So you can kind of see that's just like light aging, but it definitely helps. But we're probably going to need to intensify it a little bit. So what I like to do for wrinkles, because sometimes you'll notice a lot of like old age makeup has a little bit of like red or like a purple to it. I like to take something that's sort of like a reddish purple. Again, if you're really cool, you would need like a cooler purple. If you're really warm, you would need it to be warmer. But something in that kind of family can really help, I feel like, bring out your wrinkles. So this is going to look super intense, but everything can definitely be blended back out. So that just made them a million times more dramatic. But you can see, like, that way if I was doing extreme old age, you can certainly still use a powder, and it will help you get just as much definition as you could get if you were using a cream. I especially like to use purples when I'm in the eye area, just because that tends to be a lot of like the discoloration that people end up having. And again, we just kind of want to go in and kind of shade all that down. And so it looks a little rough right now because we have to go in and blend everything, but this is going to give us a good place to start from. And I think especially you can really see it when I turn to the side like that. And so at this point, this is probably a little bit too intense for someone who's just supposed to be middle-aged. So we can kind of come back in and soften. So I like to use these little like rounded brushes like this. Again, my really cheap like e.l.f. brushes. And just kind of soften things like this. So if you want to soften something that's a line and make it like a blended line, if you just kind of pull the color back and forth, that's going to soften it, but you're still going to retain the shape. And with these, usually you want to kind of pull it up to blend it as well, but you really want to feather out those ends, because that's what's going to help it look more realistic. And so here, it's just good to kind of have like a general darkness on the corner, so that's kind of all we're trying to do here. And I don't even think it's bad when you do kind of haphazardly apply it like that, because I think that that kind of helps make it look like a little bit of like veining could be going on, because like the older you get, your skin is just going to get like a little bit thinner. So that's just sort of like mirroring that. essentially. And so if you want to play up the eye area a little bit more, make yourself look a little bit more tired, you can kind of use a combo of like blue and purple. Again, you could do all this with creams, but I think a lot of us have a lot more like eyeshadows and things these days, and they're also a little bit cheaper a lot of the times too. So I always want to show that you don't have to have like tons of cream makeup and tons of powder makeup and things like that. You can do everything with just one type and have it all kind of work out anyway. Personally, I like to work with powders too. I have really oily skin, so for me it's easier to draw in a detail with a powder than it is to draw in a detail with a cream a lot of times, because even if I powder my face and I put like a primer and things on, my face just doesn't always want to kind of accept that, and it just kind of oils back off. And so the next thing we can do is start adding in highlight. So anywhere that there is a wrinkle or any kind of a shadow, you need a highlight to go with it. So this is just a matte eyeshadow. So if you had like a matte highlight powder, I've used one with like a light shimmer, that's also fine too. For me, I would probably need something a little bit closer to white if I was going to be like super far away so that you could be seen, but basically the most intense highlight needs to be under the most intense part of the shadow, and then they both kind of fade out from there. So your highlight is generally going to be like blended down, whereas your wrinkle is usually going to be blended up. So obviously that's going to depend on like the part of your face that you might be working on, but generally speaking, that is kind of how you can think about it. But you can see just adding like that little bit of highlight can really help it pop a little bit better, and I feel like adding in the highlight, especially with powders, can really help clean up any weird edges. So like I feel like in this side, like this one got away from me a little bit, so that really helps it get a little bit more natural looking, because it kind of knocks down some of the too like harsh of edges that we got. And so if you go like right under the eye bag, that's gonna help pop that. Go under this kind of secondary eye bag, and then you can also kind of go in around here. So the crow's feet can get a little tricky. That is one area that I feel like ends up being a little bit easier to just use pencils, but we're gonna try to just keep it to shadows. And so if you feel like that's not totally as bright as it could be, which I do kind of feel like it's a little bit too flat, because again, I am pretty pale, I'm going to come in, so it's a highlighter, but it's not like a super glittery one, just to help it pop a little bit more in some places. But again, middle-aged, I feel like with middle-aged makeup, if you had to do it really quickly, I think as long as you added in like the shadows, you could probably still sell it as being like middle-aged without having all of your highlights and everything. And so you do want to be careful with any highlight that you're not doing like too much of it, because you don't want it to like make you look super young or anything, but sometimes just having like that little bit will help pop it just a little bit more. So probably having like a white eyeshadow would be even better, but I think for these purposes it's working out pretty well. And so again, we can just kind of like go in, we'll add a hint more shading in some places, but I think that we're getting to be in a pretty good place here with this, and I think especially for middle age, a lot of that's going to come in, I feel like, around the eyes, and like the eyes are just going to be tired. And so you'll notice like I added in all my shadows first, but a lot of people will add in their highlights. I always think that it's whatever you're most comfortable with. I think for a lot of age makeup, it is traditionally taught that you would put in highlights first. If you see them more easily, then certainly do that. I personally see shadows more easily than I see highlights, so I always like to do my shadows first, just because I think that for me personally, it's just easier for me to see it. So at this point, our wrinkles are kind of where they need to be. We can touch up any kind of highlighter or any kind of like of our highlights that aren't bright enough. So usually under my eyebrow I highlight a lot for like a regular makeup, so I'm not really going to do it too much there, but I do want to add like a little bit of regular makeup over this, just to kind of sell it. So instead of using like a color that was like brighter like I did here, I'm going to use more of like a neutral color that on me is not like the most flattering color in the world. And so if you use something that's sort of like a mid-tone, or like maybe just like a touch too dark, you can see where that kind of helps to just like recede it all back, whereas that color, because it's so bright, kind of pops it all out. So we're just gonna kind of make this a little bit darker, and I feel like having things with sort of like a warmer tone to it on the eyes too, that can kind of help. Just, it kind of looks like when people just like wear like the wrong eyeshadow color. That's sort of what I'm thinking for this. And you can kind of just like blend it into where all your wrinkles are, so that way you'll have like that definition, but it's not gonna give you like a bright open eye. You can see like, since that's a darker color, it kind of popped my eye back even more. Whereas like this was really bright, so that kind of opened it up. And so I can still have my regular makeup again, so we can still throw on a little bit of blush. I'm gonna use a color that I normally wouldn't wear, just because, I don't know, I guess in my head I'm just thinking of someone that's just kind of wearing all the wrong makeup, I guess, instead of like their pretty younger makeup, which I guess is just the character I decided. So this is more of like a coral tone, which me in my personal life, I don't usually wear blush like that. But you can see again, because it's a little bit deeper, it's not so like bright and like in your face, it just kind of helps like recede everything. So it still gives me color. It can help me blend my contour a little bit more. But it just kind of like pulls everything back. So I don't know, maybe this is me at 58, not at 48, because it's a little bit too intense. But you can see that it just kind of helps kind of sell your character a little bit more. So for the lips, I'll try to just do the one side. I mostly took off what I had already. But again, I just like to fill in the whole thing with lip liner, just so that way, if all my lip color comes off, I at least have something. So this color on its own is a little bit too bright. So I have like a nude that's like a little bit duller, that I'm just gonna put on this side. If I had to do something where it's a risk that this is gonna come off, I would want to set it, which you can do if you hold like a tissue over your face and you powder over it. That can help it. Otherwise, if you use like a liquid lip stain, that can also really help. And then if you're still at a point where you're like, oh, I don't know if this is showing up enough, here's just like a cream pencil, and that can really help. So this is like a Kajal eyeliner, but something like that, if you just have a couple of spots where you're like, I know that that could pop a little bit more, just that little bit of highlight really did make it too intense. Not too intense, made it more intense, but sometimes I feel like with middle-aged makeup, that's not always what you want, because you don't necessarily want to look like super, super old. You just want like a little bit of aging. So that's why I do think the powders can be nice for that, but sometimes it is nice just to have a little bit of a bump. And then I would need to go back and set that with some kind of a powder. So I would probably come in with like one of my powder highlight colors and set that just so it doesn't come back off. It is still a cream base, even though it is technically an eyeliner, it's still a little creamy. And you would want to make sure that it was really going to stay on. So you can see, so just that little bit, that really did help pop it. I didn't really do anything to like sag my jaw or anything, because again, this is only supposed to be middle-aged, and it's a theater middle-aged, so it's more dramatic than just me in my regular life middle-aged, I hope. And then one more little detail that I always like to add to is a little bit of redness around the eyes. So I'm going to use an eyeshadow that's kind of like a burgundy to do that. That just also helps you look a little bit tired. You just want to make sure that any kind of red that you're putting around your eyes is safe to be there, because a lot of like blushes and lip products that we might want to use are not actually eye safe. I don't necessarily think they're going to do anything to like immediately hurt you, but they may irritate your skin, and if you're doing makeup on someone else, you never want to do anything that you knew ahead of time could actually hurt them. So just make sure that you're always conscious of that, and you want to make sure that you are never putting anyone in danger if it's a danger that you knew you could kind of avoid. And then let's see if we feel like, oh, I think maybe my crow's feet. So again, we did this mostly in powder. My real trouble is I don't even think I own white eyeshadow, to be honest. So some things, if you don't own it, obviously you may have to come in and kind of like not use the wrong brush. You might have to use a little bit of cream, but still it's probably more likely, I feel like sometimes, that you may have some kind of like a white eyeliner than it would be for you to have like all this white cream makeup or something like that, or if you had a white eyeshadow, or if you're just not as pale as me, you may not have this problem. And so that's something else too, is I'm very pale, so that's why I can have a little bit of trouble sometimes. But you just want to make sure that when you do all that, you're not making anything too dark or too bright. I mean, as I get very, very bright every time I turn away. So after that, I just want to make sure that I come in, and again, it's my own face, so I can touch it and just kind of smooth that out. I'm still not going to do tons of like eyeliner or anything, but you could do, I think, just like a normal kind of eyeliner. I wouldn't do, depending on your character, that's the thing, like, I guess for the way I'm imagining myself, I wouldn't do like a winged eyeliner, because that's what I do in my like normal life now, but maybe just like a little bit. I feel like blue eyeliner is something that a lot of older people use, but again, I think it's all just kind of like a personal sort of a preference. So again, I'm gonna curl my lashes a little bit, put on a little bit of mascara, which deceptively looks a lot like my one lipstick that I almost put on instead. And then we can talk a little bit about eyebrows. I'm not going to do any hair graying or anything in this video because we have the other one on that, but I would probably add in a few streaks of gray, just to kind of help sell the character. And again, it might be like, in your real life you may not look this old when you're just middle-aged, but for theater everything is always just a little bit more extreme, just so we can really sell whatever character it is that we're trying to do. And then as far as brows go, I'm not gonna do anything that like defines them too much, because I don't want to look like how I would do my eyebrows in my regular life now, but I want to have enough color so that you can kind of see them. And so I am missing some hair, so I usually pencil mine in, but I'm not gonna make them look kind of as like nice as it would at my age now. And again, it's because I am playing a character and not my 28-year-old self. So all I did was just add in a little bit of color, just so that I can have it be defined, but in there, but not look like too nice, or anything like that. Not that you can't look nice when you're middle-aged, but again, everything we do in theater is usually done to be a little bit more intense than what real life would be. And so again, if I'm like, oh, I feel like that got too bright, I just took a little bit of this purple and just kind of pulled it down, and then I feel like we're missing like a hint of a highlight, like kind of in here, and so I'm just gonna put that in there to kind of help that look more like a bag and less like a little smoky eye, because I think it was getting a little bit too much like a smoky eye. And again, everybody's face is going to kind of be different, but the most important thing is that wherever you're putting your wrinkles, just make sure that you have a highlight with it, and vice versa, just because that's going to help sell it. So that kind of helps this look a lot puffier than it did before, because before it was almost getting a little bit more like it was just some eye makeup that was maybe not that greatly done. So kind of always kind of keep that stuff in mind. But yeah, you can see like just putting on a little mascara kind of brightened up my eye a lot, so that's why I'm like, don't really want to do a ton of eyeliner unless your character calls for that. So again, probably add a little bit of gray to this. You could add a little bit of redness and some age spots if you want to, but since we're just supposed to be more like middle-aged, I'm gonna leave it at that. But yeah, you can kind of see as I close my eye on this side too. Definitely I look a little older than when we started. Not super old, but it would be believable enough on stage that I was clearly somewhat aged, especially compared to a side like this that looks a lot younger. So really, most important thing to remember from this lesson, powders are great. You can use them for all of your aging. You can really use them for any makeup to make sure they stay on. I would definitely want to set it with setting spray, because if I go like this, all my wrinkles would probably be gone. So don't forget about that. Don't forget about setting anything that you put back on that was creamy, like the highlights I did. keep colors a little bit darker and duller than you would if you were aging, and really pay attention to like who it is that your character is, because that can kind of help you figure out like the more like beauty makeup aspects of it, if there are any of those. But yeah, most important thing, darker colors help recede things. Powders are great, and you kind of just do the opposite of your corrective makeup if you were trying to age yourself.